Welcome to the Empower Your Team podcast series with your host, Cloé Caron, founder and president of O2 Coaching. In this podcast series, Cloé and her guests will take you on a journey, sharing their leadership stories, struggles, successes, and learnings. The conversations will highlight practical advice and insights for leaders.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast, Empower Your Team. This week, a conversation on authenticity and vulnerability. And that's why I stayed at the cottage to be as authentic as possible and as real as possible with you for this conversation. I was very impressed a couple of weeks ago, not in a positive way, that more than 90% of leaders feel completely overwhelmed these days. I'm not surprised by that. This is what I see in my practice. That statistics come from surveying more than 200 leaders at my Empower Your Team movement launch. And so I feel like we need, as leaders, to think about how do we take care of ourselves? How do we define our non-negotiables, if you will? Because at the end of the day, leading a team, leading others, it starts with us. That's why in my book, that's the whole first chapter, connecting with myself. And so hopefully with this podcast, you find tools or you find time to think about what it means for you to be authentic, what it means for you to be vulnerable and express that authenticity. And you get to define how you can get re-energized with being authentic and vulnerable. So my guest this week, Andrea Schwarz, she's a leader in the pharma world. She's also a part of the WLP, Women Leaders in Pharma. That's where her and I met. You will see she does not lack authenticity. She does not lack vulnerability. And for that, we thank her and we love her. Have a listen. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to have Andrea Schwarz this week. Andrea, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, Cloé. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, so excited. You and I met at the WLP, Women Leaders in Pharma. I was doing a conference, if I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you're now a lead on the board of that organization. I love what you're doing with all of your activities and tactics and ideas. And really excited. You've also moved into a new role as head of sales for Telus Health Care Centers.
Yes, correct.
So really excited to have you because you and I, when we started to have this conversation about you being on the podcast and having read the book, you said, I would really love to focus on vulnerability and authenticity.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about that topic.
I have a definition that I wanted to submit to you and see what resonates with you. Like, where are you aligned on that definition? And it's authenticity is a concept in psychology, existential psychiatry, and whatnot, which refers to the degree to which a person's actions are congruent with their beliefs and desires, despite external pressures to conformity. In human relations, a person's lack of authenticity is considered bad faith in dealing with other people and with oneself. Thus, authenticity is the instruction of the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself. What are your thoughts on that? And what's your definition of vulnerability and authenticity?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Cloé. I like that a lot. It does resonate with me. I like to keep things simple. So when I define authenticity, to me, it's really about being genuine and living and leading in your truest form. The conformity piece really resonates as well, because I find when people conform, whether it's in their personal or professional lives, and it's not aligned with who they are and their core values, there's a conflict that happens. And so I love authenticity because it's really about, communicating openly, being honest, transparent, vulnerable, all those things that for some people is easier than others. I just know there's so much benefit when you're living an authentic life versus not. So that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about it, because I've seen the benefits of both, of when you're not being authentic and the other side of when you are being. So really your presence today is an invitation for all of us to be authentic. Totally agree. I'm going to encourage everybody because I'm very passionate about it.
And yet, to your point, it's not that easy. And it's not
No.
that easy when you climb the ladder, professional ladder, because there are some pressures, or we at least feel that we have pressures. What are your thoughts on that? On how we can stay the course, if you will, on that authenticity?
Yeah, I think when you look at the positives of authenticity, when you're in that situation, when you're climbing the corporate ladder, when you're your true authentic self, it feels right, right? It just inside, it feels good. It improves your personal well-being. So I think it's super important to have that sense inside, and it will give you a greater satisfaction for your current role. There are risks, obviously. I think, to put yourself out there, you have to know when, that vulnerability and that authenticity needs to come out. And I think that's where people get really challenged it's being brave and bold enough to say, I don't believe in this, or this isn't sitting right with me, and this is why. And I think as leaders, we're called to be authentic. And if we're not, it's not going to feel right. You're going to feel disengaged and less committed. So,
and people feel it too. That's the thing. Even though we cannot put a word on it, maybe, but we sense when things are not aligned and when there's something off.
Yep. There's that intuition feeling, right? And if you're not authentic, I think we've all been in that room where people pick up on it, right? And people gravitate. It's a relational piece too. So I think people really need to work at being their authentic self in those situations. And as leaders, I think we're called to do that and model it for other people.
And today you are walking the talk, because you're sharing a story or an example, a situation in your career where perhaps you weren't as authentic as you would have liked to be. What was that?
So I can think of one situation that stands out for me, and authenticity is actually one of my core values. So I'll just start with that. I really believe in it. And I've done a lot of work on what are my core values. And the one time in my career where I found that I wasn't being as authentic was a misalignment with my own core values and the organization. Two of my other core values are really health and wellness. I'm in the healthcare industry. I have been for 20 years. So I'm really passionate about the health and wellness. And the second core value for me is really balance. As a working mom, I know it's very challenging. I know that for working parents in particular, that balance can be a really tricky thing to find. And there's times in your career where your family's going to be, the balance is going to be off, and you're going to be more with your family if you have a sick child or parent. Or on the flip side, at work, there could be a meeting or something going on where there's a lot of time in the balance on that side. And it's having that harmony between the two. And the situation I found myself in is that the balance was off for a very extended period of time. I love working. I love my job. I love what I do, but I also love being a mom. And I know that I believe women can do both and do it very well. And what was happening was I was continuing this pace for such a long period of time. It wasn't weeks, it was months of that balance being completely off. And I knew better. I knew it was against my core values. It wasn't sitting well. And as a leader, what I found was I was conforming to that, and I was starting to, behave that way with my team, mainly because I felt within the organization everybody else was doing it. So this is just the way it is here. But it was really driving me internally, because I'm like, this is wrong. Like, this is not right. Everybody around is talking about it. And I wanted to be that voice in the room to say, this isn't right. So it went on for a few months. And I really struggled because I wasn't being my authentic self. I wasn't living true to my values. I wasn't speaking up, and I was conforming.
And so when you talk about the impact, I'm hearing impact on yourself, probably your family, and definitely your team, because you started to act based on the context and reality, but also the what you were imposing on yourself based on what you believed were the norms in the organization. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And I'd say the impact, the number one impact is actually, I'm going to be selfish and say to me, yes, because I was basically clinically burnt out. And I know people talk about being burnt out all the time, but I had never experienced it like I had here. And I basically showed up in the doctor's office and she said, Andrea, if you don't take some needed time off, you'll be months recovering. And you need to take a step back and reset. And I was so thankful because I have a disease that's called people pleaser. So I always joke about it. But the biggest impact was to me, my health and wellness and who I am as a core, to my family, absolutely, and to my team. I'm a leader. I'm responsible to model for them and be the best possible leader I could be for them. And I wasn't showing up as my best possible self. I wasn't. So it was an impact. It was a cycle too, right? So I had to get myself back into place and reset and come back stronger and, be very clear on my vision and my own personal boundaries and, look at the work that needed to be done and almost reprioritize and look at it and, what is my primary focus? What is important? What can I take off my plate? I had to really do a true reset, which felt really good.
So I cannot tell you how happy I am that you're sharing this story because I hear that story day in, day out. And especially, I have to say, with women, because that disease of being a pleaser, people pleaser, is really present in women leaders. And I'm wondering what we could tell them today that would make them realize that they don't have to go as far as what you described. They can say, whoa, stop. You don't have to behave in such a way. What would you want to tell them?
Yeah, and people pleasing is something that I am highly self-aware of, and I'm always working at it. And it's a journey. It's not something that I would say has happened overnight. So where I'd encourage people is to really look at saying yes to the things that give you energy, say yes to the things that are your primary focus on what you need to do, and really practice saying no to the things that don't give you energy and are taking you away from your primary focus. That in itself for people pleasers is very hard to do. So I would encourage baby steps, and I would encourage saying yes to the right things and saying no to the things that don't give you energy and aren't fulfilling. It's not easy. And removing things. I had to remove some of the things in my personal life, some of my volunteer experience, because I'm very involved in the community. It was really hard for me to take a step back, but I knew to get better and to get myself to that level, I had to look at my entire life, my corporate, my family, and outside of that. And a good leader does that. A good leader looks at it and says, you know what, I'm not doing a good job here. And I'm going to pause here and let somebody else step in, empower somebody else to do it. So yeah, I think from a people pleaser, just please practice self-care, self-love, and saying yes and no to the right things.
So I really want to revisit a few of the things you said because they're really, really important. So first of all, a leader is not somebody that is perfect. Let's forget about perfection, ladies and gentlemen, but ladies especially, let's forget about perfection. What you said is being aware and being aware of the holistic view of leadership, which is taking care of yourself first so that you can take care of others, is what really resonates with what you're saying. And you said something that it's funny because in another podcast with Ruth Vachon, she's the president of Réseau des Femmes d'Affaires du Québec Women's Network here in Quebec. And she said the title of her podcast is actually, and I think I write that in the book as well, is saying no in order to say yes to what really matters. Exactly what you just said. Yeah.
Every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else, right? So it's, what are you saying no to? Make sure you're saying no to the right things.
So you can't say yes to what really matters. And it's not a question of having a long list of things to do. Are you putting your energy where it really, really, really counts? Would you say that that's been the hardest experience in your career? Or is there something else that was a really big challenge, perhaps not from the health? Yeah.
You know what? Like that question, I think my biggest challenge, it kind of goes with the people pleaser, but it's learning how to have boundaries in a culture in some organizations that doesn't necessarily promote healthy boundaries. That's been my biggest challenge is how do I do that? I know I'm a really strong leader for other people, Cloé. I think my challenge has been, how do I be the best leader for myself? And having boundaries. I'm great at telling people what to do, and right? Like I do. So for me, I think it's really having those boundaries, and it's hard. It's hard when you're climbing the corporate ladder and, people are having meetings early in the morning, late at night, working weekends. And you're like, you know what? I can't do that. Like, I want to model this. I'm okay to do it sometimes, but not consistently. And it's knowing what your negotiables are and your non-negotiables. That's been my biggest, I think, difficulty as a leader, and living that, not just saying it, but living it.
And the courage it takes to kind of speak up. But once you do, so I had Stéphanie Trudeau, she's the head here of Énergie here, and she says, at one of our meetings, I stood up and I said, you know what, I have to go to my boys' hockey tournament or whatever it was. And everybody came to her after, and men came to her saying, thank you for raising that, because I would have not said anything. And yet everybody was thinking about it. Like that, sometimes you have to put limits, and you have to speak up about it so that people can say, oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And I think people admire that, right? I'm very authentic with my teams. I always have been about who I am as a person, which includes children and extra things outside of work. And people value that, and people appreciate it. And I think, especially during COVID, everything that's been going on, I love seeing the kids come on the screens and the real life situation with dogs barking and all of that, right? Like, it's so refreshing, right? So, and I think we have to be empathetic to people's situations. Some people have more difficult situations during COVID right now with their home situation and what's happening. And, being a leader during this time has been challenging as well, because I've had my own personal struggles, just like everybody else. So, I think that's part of the authenticity, that vulnerability, that transparency, and being open and honest and building trust with your team. It goes a long way.
And if you had to suggest one or two resources that could help someone engage in that transformation, engage on that path, what would you say?
I would say, again, I'm going to go back to baby steps. I think authenticity is a personalized journey, and I think people need to look at it. And I think safety is one of the main things. When I talk to people, because I get the compliment often that you're so authentic, and, how do you do it? And, I just say to people, I'm just who I am, just like I am with my friends and at home, at work. And I would encourage people to have baby steps. They have to be brave and bold. Some people, it's very hard to do that. So practicing that bravery, every time we practice bravery and we push ourselves outside our comfort zone, people always come out on the other side feeling really proud of themselves and, increased confidence. So I would just encourage people, baby steps, and practice being brave and bold. It's really, really important, and it always pays off.
And I know you believe in coaching. I know you believe in books. I know you believe in podcasts.
All of that stuff. All of that. Oh yeah. I'm known as the research girl. I love to research things. So if you're looking at resources like that, there's so much at your fingertips, Cloé, like, just Googling things, looking at podcasts, reading books. I've done a lot of research myself. That's part of how I've learned and grown as a leader. And I think if people are interested, there's just so many resources out there to help them. So it's at your fingertips. You just have to craft the time to do it, say yes to it, and find some time to do it. Absolutely.
And say no to the Netflix series.
Or scrolling. Yes, exactly. I totally agree.
It's been a pleasure to have you here on the podcast, Empower Your Team. Looking forward to seeing you soon.
Great. Thanks, Cloé. Thanks for having me.
Let's give it to Andrea, because I know that her story really resonates with many of you, and it definitely resonates with me. And it's just a great reminder that as a leader, as a human being, let's say, the fastest way, as I mentioned, to connect is being authentic and vulnerable. I was reminded myself of that a couple of weeks ago when I felt really sad, actually, because my expectation was for a dear friend to be there for me, and she wasn't at the level that I wanted. And so the first couple of hours after that event, I was actually very mad, and I expressed my frustration to her. And it's interesting because she could not hear what I had to say. And when I said, if I cannot lean on you, who am I going to be able to lean on? If I cannot be vulnerable with you, who am I going to be able to be vulnerable with? And it opened up such a powerful and deep conversation that, again, it reminded me the importance of just being real, not letting your ego and not letting your fears get the best out of you. To the contrary, believing and trusting that what you've built with that person and who you are as a human being is enough. And that's true when you lead a team. That's even more true when you lead a team. People see you. They know you, even though you're not showing who you are, perhaps completely. So why don't you show up and show who you are, so that people at least can get the benefit of all of you, the beauty of you, including your vulnerability. So that's my invitation. And until then, I hope you stay inspired and inspired.
Thanks for listening to the Empower Your Team podcast. Now it's time to take action. Join the leaders who are already part of the Empower Your Team movement and visit our website at empoweryourteam.com to know more on how to participate.